All right, everybody, welcome. If you're having anxiety in regards to world events, politics, the economy, or any other kind of current issue, and you're finding yourself having automatic negative reactions to what's happening in the world today, and you would like to make sure that you can feel more even keeled, calm, and level headed, regardless of what it is that's going on geopolitically or in the economy, then this is going to be a very, very important lesson for you. I'm going to be sharing some insights from number one, my own anxiety recovery that I experienced over 15 years ago, where I used to have debilitating anxiety. I tried therapy medications. I was hospitalized. I tried all the standard stuff. None of that really worked. And I found a unique method to really not only overcome my anxiety, but stay anxiety free for 15 plus years. And then now I've been professionally helping people with anxiety issues for about 7.5 years. And I've had over 600 successful anxiety recoveries with clients. And so a lot of what I'll be sharing with you today is localized expertise and information based off of what I've seen work again and again. And it's also because right now at the time of this recording, depending on when you're viewing, if you're with us live, that's great. I see some people are joining us live right now. That's awesome. Hey guys, how's it going? For those of you guys who are joining us after the fact, this is being recorded in March of 2025. So we had an election not too long ago. And then in addition to the election taking place, there's just been a lot of changes happening in the world. And what I've noticed is that there's been some trends happening where people are experiencing anxiety about the changes that are happening in the world. And we saw this exact same thing happen fairly recently, a couple short years ago when the war with Russia and Ukraine occurred. And then I saw this exact same thing occur when COVID started to happen as well. Anxiety levels started to raise, and people's automatic negative reactions to world events, politics, governmental actions, and then also people in their own friend and family group who had converging political opinions. All of that reactivity surged at a heightened level. And I can guarantee you for sure these types of world events are going to happen again. And I want to really just kind of break down like what is happening mentally and emotionally that's causing all of this anxiety. How can you actually feel anxiety free and stay anxiety free, even in spite of things taking place in the world that might be negative, that might be destructive, and that may be very far from being within your control. Okay, so if you're new to our community, again, my name's Ty Hicks, founder of mentalhealthcoaching.com, and also the subconscious rewiring method that we've used to help people overcome anxiety. So most recently, I think it was a couple of weeks ago now, we saw that recently elected President Trump met with the president of Ukraine. That meeting did not exactly go very well. There's been now newfound skepticism and doubt in terms of what is really going to happen with the Russian-Ukrainian conflict. Where are we headed from here? The economy is changing. There have been a sweep of executive orders that have taken place. So this is not me making a political argument about whether they're good or bad or what have you. But there have been a sweep of new governmental changes and policies and things taking place. Obviously, the White House has changed. Obviously, the makeup of the political structure in Congress and the Senate has changed a little bit. And there's conflict going on in the world, just to name a couple key items that are happening right now. If you're watching this months or years later, there could be some new thing that's going to be taking place, some new government policy that's occurring. It could be some new virus. It could be some new conflict. And these things happen in a cyclical nature, which is part of my bigger point of how to make sure that you can deal with this in a way where you reduce anxiety and really make sure it doesn't happen again. So first thing to understand that I want to help you understand here is that we feel anxiety in direct proportion to how little power we believe that we have in terms of affecting our quality of life. So I'm going to say that one more time, because this is, if you got nothing else from today's session, this is kind of the key thing that I want you to get, and I'll be breaking this down and making it much more apparent. Okay, so we feel anxiety in direct proportion to how little power we believe that we have over our own life. Okay, now the thing is, for different types of anxiety, we will have different types of beliefs about what type of power we do not have. And I can break this down into three specific categories. So in all of my work with people and helping them overcome anxiety, I've found that Really, you can trace any type of anxious thought or belief back to three particular types. Okay, the first type is what we call a distortion of circumstances. Okay, a distortion of circumstances is when we believe some variation of a belief that says things must go how I prefer, or else I just cannot stand it. Okay, that's a distortion of circumstances. So a distortion of circumstances can be a multitude of different things that can be everyday type things. And I've encountered all of these examples I'm about to share with you with clients before. So if someone's got, say, like agoraphobia or an issue driving or getting out of the house, they, whether they are aware of it or not, they have a subconsciously implanted belief that says, I cannot feel safe unless I am home. Okay, that might be a version of it. Or another version I remember encountering once was, unless there is no traffic out on the roads, I cannot go drive. If the weather is bad, I cannot leave the house. If there are too many people in a public place, I cannot go shopping. Okay, so there are all sorts of variations of these types of beliefs, and these beliefs, again, are happening at the subconscious level. Most people are completely unaware that the belief is what's causing the automatic negative reaction. All they are aware of is the automatic negative reaction, and they just want to get rid of that anxiety, that feeling of anxiety. But meaning happens first, feeling happens second. If you're feeling anxious, it's because you have at least one or more subconscious beliefs that's causing you to feel that you are less powerful than you actually are. So if I have a belief that says I cannot drive my car, let's say, unless the weather is perfect and there's not a lot of traffic and there's not too many people out on the road and all these other things. Well, think about what's happening. What I'm doing is a process that we teach our clients called giving your power away. You're giving your power away to all of these different things. It's almost like if you were to attach a bunch of little strings to your heart and then attach those strings to items in the outside world that are outside of your control. Well, now all it takes is that little thing outside of your control to jostle itself or to move a certain way. And oh my gosh, now all of a sudden you feel yourself automatically reacting to that experience. But you can only negatively automatically react to that experience if there is a belief that says that thing has to go a certain way, or else I just cannot feel whole, I cannot feel calm, I cannot feel safe, I cannot feel good enough, okay, whatever version you want to put into that scenario. So this first core set of beliefs is a belief system that is what we call a distortion of circumstances. A distortion of circumstances, again, let me remind you, is a belief structure that says X has to go the way I want it to go, or else I cannot stand it. Okay? I can't. It's not possible. And what I want to invite you to understand is that belief at its core is a fiction. It very well may be something that you feel fully, completely is true. But one thing I've learned, again, over the years helping people is that we will believe anything that we repeat to ourselves enough times. So if right now you're thinking, well, no, Ty, you don't understand. I legitimately just cannot, do X, Y, Z because of A, B, C. I just can't. What I'm going to very much encourage you to keep in mind is that you decided probably quite some time ago about what you can and can't do, and then you started repeating that story to yourself, and the more times you've repeated it, the more certain it became. What that is basically like a process of self-hypnosis. So the brain will literally believe anything that we repeat to it enough times. And so you got to start to wake yourself up from that hypnosis. The second type of thought that creates a big problem for us is what we call the distortion of others. The distortion of others is very similar but slightly different. The distortion of others is when we believe some version of the belief that says other people must do what I want or else I cannot stand it. So whereas the first one is circumstantial, it might be, I cannot go drive my car unless it's perfectly sunny and there's no traffic. The second one might be, And I see this all the time with people, where, especially if they've got, say, social anxiety, for example. So it could be anything from like, people cannot disagree with me, people should not drive aggressively, people should not come too close to me at the supermarket, people should text me back when I text them, people should call me once a week to check in on me. Okay, there's a million different variations of this core belief, but whenever you have a belief like this, and it revolves around someone else having to do something in order for you to feel whole, you've now again given part of your power away to someone else, without intending to, of course. And so as you become less powerful, now as soon as that thing doesn't go exactly how you want it to go, you feel this automatic twinge, an automatic reaction. So regardless of what type of anxiety you have, I guarantee you're experiencing some of those distortions and beliefs. The third type of distortion and belief is what we call the distortion of self. The distortion of self basically says, I must do what I expect all the time, or else I cannot stand it. Okay, another variation of that would be like, if I do X, I am an X person. Okay, so for example, if I make a mistake at work, let's say I make a mistake, as opposed to saying, oh, I made a mistake, it was a localized event that's not necessarily indicative of who I am as a person, if we now create a belief that says, I made a mistake, therefore I'm a failure, okay, that's a very, very anxiety-inducing belief. So when we distort the momentary specific event and now turn it into a belief about our identity, now we're in trouble. So those are the three types of thoughts that create anxiety. You can trace any feeling of anxiety to one or more of those thoughts, I guarantee it. And as soon as we identify, interrupt, and replace every single one of those types of thoughts and beliefs that are hanging out in your subconscious, then we will finally be able to make sure that you can live a life without anxiety. It's a really, really powerful thing. Okay, so how does this pertain to politics? Well, hopefully it's making sense how it would pertain to politics. Because let's think about things that you cannot control. What would be the number one thing on that list? What your government does. Now, you can influence what your government does, and you probably should, right? But you cannot control what your government does. You also cannot control whether there are conflicts taking place in the world. You cannot control the global economy, nor do you need to, by the way. In fact, most people who are experiencing financial stress and anxiety focus far too much on the aspects of the economy that they cannot control and believe that those have far more to do with their localized financial health, as opposed to putting their time and effort and energy into the actions that are within their control to improve their financial well-being and health. And that is a much more effective and healthy use of your energy and limited focus. So when we create a set of beliefs, and I've been seeing this, I've just been seeing like all of these people, like I've been doing calls these past couple months, and a certain percentage, I don't know how many, but a certain percentage of people, I'll ask them, okay, cool, tell me a little bit about the anxiety you're dealing with. And they'll say, well, there's just so much going on in the world. There's this happening, and there's this happening, and then there's this happening. And remember, this is not about me. I'm not trying to argue with you politically, right? Like, if you've been feeling distressed about what's been going on politically, I'm not saying, like a lot of people are out there, I'm not saying, oh, calm down, it's not a big deal, this is the right thing. I'm not advocating for any political position at all. I'm not trying to persuade you of any political persuasion. What I want you to be living your life as powerfully as possible, and as powerfully as you deserve to be. I want you living a life where you are no longer under the hypnotic delusion that something else is in control of your life. Now, let me be very clear. Are there other things that happen in the world that affect your life? Yes, absolutely. Right? There are things that are outside of your control that do affect your life. Does the government affect your life? Yes, 100%, absolutely. However, if you are feeling so automatically reactive to any little law or any little thing of that nature, my suggestion to you is you're putting your focus in a way that is just very, very disempowering to you. As a general rule, the more you focus on things that you cannot control and that you are not taking action to influence, the more stress and anxiety you are going to experience. And the more energy you put into either A, the things you can control that will improve your quality of life, and B, the things that you can influence that will improve your quality of life, the higher your quality of life will be, the higher your self-esteem will be, the higher your confidence will be, the better your life will be, in fact, the less reactive you're going to be. So one of the big differences between me a long time ago when I was horribly anxious and depressed, when I think back to that time, about 90% of my energy day by day was focused on what other people were doing, quote, to me. I was thinking, I was in my teenage years at the time, and I was thinking about, my parents and my family and my home life and my teachers and the economy. And I was concerned with global events and what was happening in the world. And I became basically quite cynical, as a lot of people are, like at all ranges of ages, I should have said. There's a lot of people now who are just horribly cynical. They're going, oh my gosh, the economy, we're forced to participate in the economy, where they forget, like, you're still living in the most abundant, wealthy economy that has ever existed in the history of humanity. Like, would you really, really like to trade places with somebody from 100 years ago? Would you really like to, like, I appreciate that we can always be better. I appreciate that we can always be, idealistic, and we can and we should. That's fine. I actually was quite active in political activism for quite a long time. So this is not me saying don't do your part to do something better. What I'm actually saying is put your focus into where you can influence things being better, and then where you cannot, I shouldn't say cannot, where you are choosing to not try to influence things to make them better, stop focusing on them, because it's just going to make you reactive and anxious. When I think about both the clients and then the people I know personally who are the most angry, the most reactive, the most anxious, the most unpleasant, the most unhappy, and who have the worst relationships, they are people who focus more and more and more on the things that they cannot control and that they are not taking action to influence. And when I think about the people who are the happiest, most fulfilled, most whole, they feel the most whole, they are people who dominantly spend their mental calories focusing on things that they can control to make their life better. So that is not a coincidence. And don't think for a second that just because your mind has an automatic tendency to focus on the things that you can't control, that's how it just always is going to be. That in and of itself is giving your power away to your own mind and saying, well, I can't really do much about it. You can do a whole lot. You can retrain your brain to think very differently. It's not going to happen overnight, but it can happen. You get to decide, am I going to spend, 4 hours watching the news every day? Am I going to spend, 2 hours every single day, like looking up really volatile, argumentative political opinions on my device that really does nothing to make my life better, but just pisses me off? You get to decide. You get to decide what media you intake. You get to decide who you talk with, what you talk about. You get to decide. And one of the things that has made my life infinitely better is what I call therapeutic deletion. And therapeutic deletion is when you strategically identify the things that are just sapping your energy. They are making your life worse. They are riling you up, making you upset. They are not putting you in an empowered state. They are bringing you into a disempowered state. And then I strategically delete those things from my focus and my field of vision so that I'm not focused on them. So one of the key things, and I'm not saying you have to do it exactly like this, but this tends to work okay for us. I don't watch the news, right? My wife is still engaged in that world a little bit more to a certain extent. So kind of by necessity, she's a little bit more aware, quite a bit more aware than I am of most political and current events. I don't watch the news. I don't. The very, very important news, like the really important key stuff that's going on, I'm going to hear about it eventually from someone. But what I've realized is anxiety levels were way higher for me when I was intaking the news. And what I did for a short period of time when COVID was occurring was I just basically signed up to one email newsletter where I got my bullet points of my news. Like, I could read all I needed to read in just a couple of minutes and then be done with it. And then I therapeutically deleted out all of those other world events for the remainder of my day because I was trying to build this business. I was trying to help people, right? I was trying to assist people in their own issues that they were experiencing. So I decided strategically to put my energy into serving other people, making my life better, seeking ways opportunities to grow and expand and to therapeutically delete the negative things that I could not control. So that's a key thing that I think is important to keep in mind. And so there's a little visualization, or not necessarily a visualization, but just kind of like a mental model that I encourage you to consider. And I would just loosely call it the spectrum of empowerment. So let's say on one side of a spectrum of empowerment, let's call it 0, you fundamentally believe you have zero control over your life at all. Okay, 0. Some people come to that realization, or they come to that just false belief, I should say. They come to that false belief, they tell themselves variations of that core story, and those are usually people who become, frankly, suicidal because they feel like they just have no control. There's no possible way for them to make things better or to expand, okay? On the other side of the spectrum would be someone who, and I'm not saying I'm like all the way on the fully other side of the spectrum, because I'm human enough to admit, like, yeah, I still have limiting beliefs here and there that I need to identify and work on. And that's what that's what it's about, right? Mental and emotional mastery is what I named my program for my clients. I didn't call it mental and emotional perfection, right? It's not about like getting to a state where you never have to do any more work on yourself. It's about, dealing with the repetitive, unnecessary, debilitating patterns of emotional issues that don't need to be sticking around any longer, and then continuing to incrementally grow week after week, month after month. And so what I'm consistently doing as my goals expand, as my life expands, as I'm trying to deepen relationships and do things I've never done before, is I'm constantly identifying more and more of the beliefs that have limited me, beliefs where I made assumptions that I had fewer choices than I actually have. And I remove those. I actively identify them and remove them. So anyway, let's say on the spectrum, we've got a 0 is you believe you have no choices, no options, no opportunities, no ability to be the one that's a conscious agent of your life. On the other side of the spectrum would be someone who fully believes that they are the one that gets to determine their quality of their life. Through their actions, through their decisions, they get to shape their entire reality. You could see very clearly just through that spectrum of belief systems how that one key ingredient is going to impact somebody's mental health hugely. How could you believe that you have no choices in the world and also still feel joy, right? Also still feel confident, also still feel things like empowered, also still feel excited and happy and energized? There's just no possibility. And whenever you're feeling those negative things, right? When you're feeling the absence of energy, the absence of motivation, the stress, those types of things, I guarantee you it's because you have a thought or a belief that's taking place that you have fewer choices than you actually do. And so the whole task is to shift ourselves on that spectrum to incrementally move further and further and further to the other side of the spectrum, where you remember that even though you're not fully in control of everything that happens in your life, you are 1000% in charge of what happens for your quality of life. That is one of the key things that you want to remember. And until you identify each and every subconscious belief that's robbing you of your power, then you'll never really be fully in charge of your life, and you will still feel anxiety to some extent. Now, when I usually do this process of identifying, dismantling, and then replacing the subconscious beliefs, what I find is that the average is that most people with substantial anxiety have 30 to 60 subconscious beliefs that they've been collecting over the course of their life and that are now causing them major issues. Okay, most people can become consciously aware of the top 3 to 5, but then beyond that, we have to start doing some subconscious digging. We have to use special tools to kind of pull them out of the brain and make ourselves aware of them. Okay, and that's where psychological tools become very powerful. And so I'm going to give you 2 specific little mantras, 2 specific little key things that will help you to reclaim some of your power and to assist you. So the first recommendation I would have would be start to take stock and notice of all of the different things that you find yourself automatically negatively reacting to. Okay, that would be my first thing. So make like a short list. What are the things in the past week that you had an automatic negative reaction to multiple times? So was it any time a friend of yours brought up a conflicting political opinion? Was it any time you saw a particular political person you happen to disagree with on the news? Was it whenever you thought about conflict happening at some place or some location in the world? Was it whenever you thought about the economy? Okay, was it maybe it was just something more mundane every day? Like, was it when someone was upset around you, even though they weren't upset with you, they just happened to be upset around you, and you had an automatic negative reaction? Just take stock of what those are, would be my first recommendation, because those are all of those places where you've unknowingly given your power away. Okay, that would be tip number one. Tip number two would be, you can ask yourself a key question, which is, what would I have to believe in order to feel this way? Or what would I have to believe in order to react this way? Okay, both of those can become very powerful. And that will be one tool of many you can use to help you start to identify what those beliefs are. Okay, and then there's two proactive things that you can do to start to shift out of these disempowered belief systems and into a more empowered belief system. The first one is what I call a belief structure. Okay, so it's basically a template for creating beliefs that can really help you. And so through repetition and through using it regularly, it can start to assist you in feeling much more in power and much more in control. Okay, and the key belief structure is this: I don't need X in order to Z. I don't need X in order to Z. Now, there's a million different variations of this depending on what your automatic reactions are too. But if I stick with the theme of politics, the economy, conflict, things like that, what we could say is something like, you know what? I don't need the economy to be perfect in order to make more money for my household. I don't need my preferred president to be in the White House in order for me to feel in control of my own life. I don't need there to be zero conflict in the world in order for me to feel at peace with myself. Okay, those would be different versions. Now, if we go to more everyday sort of mundane type things, it could be something like, I don't need perfect weather in order to go drive my car. I don't need people to abide by my preferences when I'm out at the grocery store in order to finish my shopping. Okay, you see the power of this? What you're basically doing is you're cutting off each one of those strings I was talking about before that you unknowingly attached yourself to with some kind of circumstance or external behavior of other people. You're saying, I don't really need that. Like, yes, I might prefer that. You know, maybe I even believe people should do that, but I don't need it. I don't require it. Okay, that's the key thing. Subconscious beliefs that disempower us are beliefs about what we require in order to feel powerful, in order to feel how we want to feel. So that's a really good, powerful belief system. The second one, the second belief structure that you can use that will help you a lot is, I may not be fully in control, but I am absolutely in charge. I may not be fully in control, but I am absolutely in charge. Now, you can use this in all sorts of contexts. I may not be fully in control of the economy, but I am absolutely in charge of my economy, my local household economy, my own wealth. Okay? I may not be fully in control of what happens in my family, but I am in charge of creating whatever quality of relationships I decide I'm going to have with my family. I may not be fully in control of what happens in my marriage and my relationship, but I am in charge and I am a leader in my marriage and making it what I want it to be. I may not be fully in control of everything that happens with my physical health, but I am absolutely in charge of my health. I am a leader, I am a director, I am taking it where I want it to be. Okay? You get the point. I may not be fully in control of everything that happens at my work and at my company, but I am absolutely in charge of my career. Okay, you see where this goes? You got to remind yourself that you're the one in the chair. You're the one in the driver's seat. Okay, you're the one with the power. The more you convince yourself that you do not have power, the more anxiety you will feel. And the more energy and attention that you decide to either willingly or unintentionally divert to things that are outside of your control that you do not prefer, the more anxiety you will experience. So my other recommendation would be to go on some type of a digital detox, remove your notifications, put do not disturb mode on, whatever it is you need to do. Change your environment in whatever way you can control it to limit the constant negative input, right? Like I said, I just don't watch the news. I don't do it. I never turn it on. And now it's impossible for me to get anxious about what's on the news. It just doesn't happen. So I would do that. And then you need to take a very serious look at what beliefs you've been having that have been causing you issues. If you'd like some assistance, by the way, if you've never taken me up on the offer to do a completely free mental health coaching, anxiety eliminations coaching session, I'm happy to provide one for you. Okay, only requirements are you got to show up on time, you got to take it seriously, and you got to be coachable. You got to be willing to implement what I teach you. But if you'd like some assistance, then if you're joining us live, just go ahead and put the word session below. I've got a couple slots open in the next couple of days. I can certainly message you and we'll figure something out. If you're joining with us later with the recording, just go ahead and go to mentalhealthcoaching.com if you don't have the ability to leave a comment underneath. But I hope you guys found this useful. We're right at the 30-minute mark, so I guess that works out great. I'll see you guys next week. Take care. Bye.